welcome back to Echo of Fears, the place where nightmares breathe and true horror never sleeps.
Story 1. The Vanishing Patrol. They found his truck still running, doors open, the headlights cutting through a curtain of falling snow, the wipers scraping over ice like fingernails on glass. Inside, the engine hummed. The heater was on. His radio sat in the passenger seat, still tuned to dispatch. And in the powder beside the driver's door, one clear line of footprints led away, straight toward the timberline. No signs of struggle, no tire tracks besides his own, just those footprints, walking into the storm. They followed them for a quarter mile before they stopped. Not faded, stopped. As if whoever made them had stepped off the face of the earth. That man was Park Ranger Tom Hensley. 12 years on duty in the Rocky Mountain wilderness, a husband, a father of 2, and a veteran of every kind of mountain weather nature could throw. And yet, on that February morning, something out there erased him. Tom wasn't new to the cold. He'd started working the backcountry zones long before the GPS era, when rangers relied on compasses, topographic maps, and instinct. He was known among his colleagues for 2 things: precision and calm. If a storm closed in, he'd be the one others called for coordinates. If a hiker went missing, Tom was usually the first to volunteer for the overnight search. He knew the ridgelines, the drainages, and every shortcut between the patrol cabins. His final assignment was nothing unusual: a 2-day sweep through Timberline Ridge, checking avalanche gates, wildlife signs, and snowpack stability readings. He'd logged his route that morning, the way he always did. 7:15 a.m. Departing base for Timberline, visibility clear. 9:22 a.m. Reached mile marker 6, snowpack stable, drift at 12 inches. 10:48 a.m. Visibility dropping, proceeding to the ridge summit. Those were his last written words. By early afternoon, dispatch noticed his signal weakening. The storm had moved in faster than predicted, dense, freezing, the kind that consumes sound and light together, a whiteout so thick that orientation becomes a trick of the mind. At 2:11 p.m., his last radio transmission came through, distorted by static. A pause, then, "Something's out here, watching." The rest was hiss. At first, dispatch assumed he was describing an animal. Mountain lions sometimes stalk in silence before snow hunts, and the Timberline sector had its share of sightings. But Tom's tone wasn't one of casual observation. It was clipped, urgent. By 3 p.m., they'd lost radio entirely. The storm intensified, and by nightfall, winds reached 60 miles per hour. Visibility, less than 20 feet. The following morning, a team of 3 rangers, Daniels, Ortiz, and Murphy, set out from the base lodge to locate him. They found his truck 10 miles from the main trailhead, idling in the cold. Fuel nearly gone. Inside, his thermos sat half full. His logbook on the dash open to a page smeared with moisture. 1. Note had been scrawled hastily at the bottom. "Seeing shapes near tree line. Need to confirm. No coordinates, no timestamp." Outside, they spotted the footprints, each step pressed deep, steady. They followed them through knee-high snow toward the ridge. After about 400 yards, Daniel stopped. He looked back at the others and said quietly, "They just stop." The line of impressions, clean and distinct, ended abruptly in open snow. No drag marks, no disturbance, just undisturbed powder beyond that point. They spread out, circling, probing with poles. Nothing. Then Murphy radioed in. "Got something here? Looks like animal tracks, but not sure what kind." They gathered around, 3 evenly spaced impressions forming a triangle. Each print roughly 8 inches across, pressed deep, as if something heavy had landed, paused, and lifted away. The pattern repeated itself irregularly down a slope toward the trees. No known species left tracks like that. They photographed them, flagged the area, and decided to push toward the ridge cabin, assuming Tom might have taken shelter. By dusk, the wind had picked up again. They reached the cabin near Timberline Pass, door locked from the outside. Inside, untouched. No firewood used, no sign of occupation. Murphy checked the storage room and froze. On the floor, beneath a pile of snow gear, sat Tom's secondary radio, its casing cracked, batteries missing. He shouldn't have left it there. Regulations required all rangers to keep a backup with them. If he'd dropped it accidentally, why had he not turned back? That night, the rescue crew huddled inside the cabin. The generator hummed. Wind rattled the shutters. Daniels reviewed Tom's log entries again under his headlamp. Every line was neat, except that last one. Those words looked like they'd been written while moving. Shaky, unaligned, pressed hard enough to tear the page. At 11:47 p.m., Ortiz said he heard something outside, a rhythmic crunching like slow footsteps moving across packed snow. He shined his flashlight through the window. Nothing. They turned off the generator. For a moment, silence. Then, a low exhale. Not wind. It came from just beyond the wall, as if something stood outside, breathing through the seams of the cabin. They stayed awake until dawn. The next morning, they radioed for backup. A larger team of 6 arrived, equipped with thermal scanners and avalanche beacons. They began a grid search extending 2 miles from the truck site outward. Around noon, Murphy's device picked up a faint heat signature near a snow cave about 50 yards below the ridge. They advanced slowly, weapons drawn, calling out Tom's name. Inside the cave, visibility was low. Snow filtered the light into a dull blue haze. Condensation hung from the ceiling in frozen stalactites. Someone whispered, "You hear that?" From deeper inside came a faint wet breathing, irregular, shallow. Daniels switched on his headlamp and stepped forward. The sound grew louder for 2 beats, then stopped entirely. They found Tom's main radio lying in the snow, still on, still tuned to the base frequency. The casing was scratched and bent as though crushed by something. No body, no blood, just the faint echo of that last transmission replaying through the static. Out here, watching, the snow around the device was disturbed, not trampled but shifted, almost as if something had tunneled beneath it. The cave extended farther than expected, but as they advanced, the temperature dropped sharply. Their breath thickened, forming clouds that hung motionless. Then, the scanner picked up movement behind them, a blip. Something large, stationary at first, then moving in a slow, deliberate circle. The team retreated. No one spoke until they reached base. They sealed the area that night and suspended all patrols north of Timberline until further analysis. The official report listed Tom Hensley as missing, presumed deceased. No trace was ever found, no remains, no gear beyond the radios. But in the weeks that followed, other rangers began filing unusual notes in their own patrol logs. Unidentified shapes near Ridge 4. Triangular impressions in snow, deep, at least a foot. Whistling in distance, no wind present. Some claimed to hear voices on their radios late at night, snippets of words they swore sounded like Tom's, his call sign, faint, buried beneath layers of static. And then there was the maintenance crew that visited Timberline Cabin in early March. When they reopened it, they found footprints inside, bare, human, but melted unevenly, as if pressed into half-frozen slush. They began at the center of the room and led to the locked door. Outside, nothing. For years, that section of the ridge was quietly removed from standard patrol routes, officially, due to unstable snowpack conditions. Unofficially, the Rangers called it Hensley's Cut. Some of the older hands still tell new recruits, "If your radio ever goes silent up there, don't call for help. Just keep walking until you reach the tree line, because if you stop, it might start watching you too." Epilogue. In 2019, nearly 5 years later, a seasonal ranger scanning avalanche zones found a corroded badge half buried in snow near the old patrol road. The engraving was worn, but the name was still legible: T. Hensley. He turned it over to headquarters, but the tag vanished from evidence within months. No record of where it went. To this day, search teams occasionally hear faint radio chatter echoing through the static on an old, unused frequency. Always the same voice, always the same words. Something's out here. Story 2. The Whispering Trail. Hook. Every ranger knows the sound of wind in the trees. It's a sound that never lies, soft when the night is calm, wild when storms roll in. But sometimes out there in the forest, the wind carries something else, something that doesn't belong. They say if you walk far enough along the old miner's route, where the trees crowd close and the air feels heavier than it should, you might hear it too. Not just the branches swaying, not the groan of trunks shifting in the cold, but voices, whispering your name. It starts faint, so faint you think it's imagination. Then it repeats. Same voice, same tone, but from the wrong direction. That's what happened on the night of October 14th, 2017, when two rangers, partners in both duty and life, were assigned to sweep the old miners' route after reports of strange noises and missing hikers. Their names were Mark and Evelyn Warren. Both experienced, both familiar with every inch of that trail, and both, by sunrise, were gone. Only one of them was ever found, and what the search team found beside her flashlight still haunts those who were there. Set up the old miners' route was one of the oldest trails in the Rocky Mountain backcountry. Before it became part of park territory, it had been a hauling road for prospectors in the 1800s. Collapsed shafts, forgotten markers, and rusted rails still dotted the landscape, hidden beneath moss and undergrowth. The trail was closed to the public for years after a series of disappearances in the 1980s, hikers who never returned, campers whose tents were found but not their tracks. Eventually, rangers reopened it for limited patrols only, strictly daylight hours, radio check-ins every 30 minutes. But that night, the Warrens volunteered for an after-hours sweep. 2 hikers had been reported missing earlier in the week, a father and son. Their campsite was discovered abandoned near the old trailhead. The footprints leading away from the site split into 2 directions and vanished within yards. No animal prints, no sign of struggle, just the prints gone. Mark and Evelyn had been married for 8 years, working together for 5. Their routine was synchronized to perfection. Mark handled navigation, Evelyn logged sightings, weather changes, and coordinates. They'd covered hundreds of square miles of forest together and had seen things most rangers would rather forget. Storms that moved like walls, flash floods swallowing trails, nights so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat echo off the trees. That evening, temperatures dropped below freezing by sunset. A half moon hung low, lighting the snow-dusted branches in pale silver. They began their patrol at 20:45 hours, logging the first entry into the nightly dispatch. Warren team commencing sweep, old miners' route, visibility fair, no civilian presence. By 21:10, they'd covered the first mile. Mark noted animal. Tracks, deer, fox, something smaller. Normal. At 21:30, Evelyn radioed in. Reached point 2, all quiet, minor fog rolling from east slope. Those were the last normal words anyone heard from them. Tension. As they approached the half-collapsed bridge near mile marker 3, Evelyn stopped. Her recorder picked up her voice faintly. "Mark, you hear that?" At first, the audio was drowned by static. Then something like a whisper bled through. Barely audible, a single word. It said her name. Evelyn. Mark dismissed it as radio feedback from dispatch, but when they checked their frequency, it was clear. No one else was broadcasting. A few minutes later, the whisper came again, this time from behind them. She turned, scanning the tree line with her flashlight. Nothing moved, but on playback the audio captured something chilling. 2 voices, one male, one female, both whispering the same name in overlapping tones. Evelyn. Mark. They kept walking, trying to rationalize it as wind tunneling through the valley, yet every few hundred feet the voices grew clearer, closer. At 21:47, Mark's log recorded, "We're hearing names from opposite sides of trail. Sounds human. Checking origin." That was the last full transmission received in real time. From that point on, the rest was recovered from Evelyn's handheld recorder, found days later lodged between roots near a hollow oak. The recording continues for nearly 40 minutes. It begins with controlled breathing, the sound of boots on gravel, Mark calling into the dark. "Hello? Anyone out there? This is Park Service. Identify yourself." No answer. Then, faintly, his own voice responded from deeper in the forest. "This is Park Service. Identify yourself." But he hadn't said it twice. He froze. Evelyn asked, "You hear that?" He nodded. The voice repeated, same pitch, same phrasing, only this time it said Evelyn. And it came from both directions. Wind doesn't mimic tone. Echoes distort, they don't duplicate. Whatever this was, it spoke with perfect imitation. The recorder picked up their breathing quickening, leaves crunching as they started moving faster, whispering to each other. Mark tried the radio. No response. The frequency crackled. Then a faint, static-ridden reply came through. A voice that sounded like his own, whispering, "Don't look behind you." Evelyn gasped, and the recording shakes. They broke into a jog, flashlights darting across the trail. The trees on both sides seemed to close in, the path narrowing where it shouldn't. Mark stopped suddenly. He thought he saw someone standing near the edge of the trail, a figure outlined by the moonlight. He called out again. No movement. Then the figure leaned forward slightly and vanished into shadow. He ran toward it. Evelyn shouted after him, the sound sharp and terrified. The recorder catches her footsteps following for a few seconds, then stops. A heavy silence follows. In the distance, his voice calls out, but distorted, almost underwater. "Ev, I found something. Come look." She hesitates. The voice comes again, clearer. "Evelyn, it's safe now." It's his voice. But there's a pause between each word, as if the speaker is learning how to say them. "Evelyn, it's safe now." She moves forward, whispering his name. The recorder shakes. The crunch of leaves, then a dull thud as she trips. When she stands, the sound of breathing fills the microphone, close, just beside her, too close. Then her voice, "Mark, where are you?" And a reply, identical to her own, answers back, "Mark, where are you?" The recording ends with a sharp crack and static. Climax. 3 days later, the search teams found her flashlight near the hollow oak, the bulb still faintly glowing. The ground around it was disturbed, as though something had circled the tree repeatedly. No animal prints, no footprints leading away. Inside the hollow, searchers discovered strands of fabric torn from her uniform, and deeper within, wedged into the wood, the small black recorder. They replayed the last 2 minutes dozens of times, isolating the sound frequencies. Underneath Evelyn's final words, another noise emerged, so faint it was almost inaudible. A layered whisper, hundreds of overlapping tones saying one phrase over and over, "We know your name." The following day, a secondary search unit found Mark's hat half buried beneath a fallen branch about a mile north. The snow around it had melted in odd shapes, elongated impressions resembling human fingers, dragging through the slush. No body, no trace of where he'd gone. By the 5th day, the operation shifted from rescue to recovery. But late that evening, as the command post was packing up, a ranger monitoring the open frequency froze. Someone was whispering over the radio, not speaking, whispering. The recording is preserved in the official file. A faint female voice saying, "I found him," followed by a male voice repeating, "I found him," in perfect sync. Then, both voices overlapping, faster and faster until they became a single sound, like wind compressed into words. It stopped at Truro 3. Dispatch logged it. The coordinates it pinged from were the same spot where the Warrens' patrol began. Aftermath. When investigators examined the hollow oak again weeks later, they found claw marks inside, long, thin, and curved. Each one ended in a rounded tip, more like fingers than claws. The bark beneath was torn in spirals, as though something had reached out from inside. Samples were taken, but no biological material matched any known species. The report's closing statement reads simply, "Possible environmental cause for auditory hallucinations, no physical threat confirmed." But among rangers, the story spread quickly. Some said the Old Miners' Route wasn't haunted, it was alive. A place that learned sounds, learned names, learned how to speak them back. Over the next year, other patrols began reporting faint voices while passing through the sector, always near dusk, always whispering the listener's name. The area was finally closed to the public after one more unexplained incident. An off-duty ranger hiking alone heard her own voice call from behind her. When she turned, no one stood there, but her GPS recorded her exact words, spoken 30 seconds before she said them. Epilogue. The old miner's route has been officially erased from public park maps. Satellite imaging still shows a faint trail cutting through the trees, but the entrances have been fenced and camouflaged. Only internal rangers know its coordinates, and even they're discouraged from patrolling past sundown. The Warrens' logbook remains archived at base headquarters, sealed with a tag marked Audio Log NAR 47, Whispering Trail. Inside, the last note Evelyn wrote reads, "Hearing wind again? It sounds like it's saying something. The tape recorder found in that hollow is stored separately in a locked cabinet. Visitors aren't told about it, but sometimes, when technicians test the equipment in the off-season, faint whispers bleed through their headset. They all report the same phrase every single time. Not a threat, not a plea. Just two names, repeated over and over. Mark, Evelyn, and after a few minutes the voices fade until a new name begins to whisper back. Sometimes it's the name of the person listening. Story 3. The Cabin Beneath the Pines. There are hundreds of ranger cabins scattered through the Rockies, supply shelters, observation posts, weather stations. Every one of them is logged, mapped, and inspected twice a year. Everyone, except one. They say there's a cabin that isn't on any chart, a structure that appears when storms roll over the high ridges and disappears when the sky clears. Those who stumble on it walk back out changed. Some stop speaking about what they saw. Others never make it down at all. The first record of it appeared in a maintenance note from 1973. Unlisted structure found near mile marker 19. Boarded windows. Smoke visible from chimney. Investigate after thaw. The follow-up line in the log simply read, "Entry rescinded. Location uncertain." That cabin remained a rumor for decades, until February 6, 2018, when Ranger Lucas Marin went missing during a blizzard. 48 hours later, he stumbled out of the tree line near the ranger base, frostbitten, delirious, mumbling one phrase over and over. There were tally marks on every wall. Lucas Marin was one of the youngest field officers in the Northern District. Smart, methodical, disciplined, the kind of ranger who double-checked every coordinate before setting foot on a trail. That winter had been relentless. Avalanches closed roads, radio towers iced over. By early February, the forecast warned of a 3-day storm stretching across the entire range. All personnel were advised to shelter at base cabins or return to headquarters. But Lucas volunteered to stay out. A pair of surveyors had failed to return from the upper valley, and he insisted on covering the final checkpoint before the storm made the passes impassable. He left at 14 hours with a snowmobile, emergency rations, and a two-way radio. His route was logged as Ridge 9 to Timber Fork, then east toward Haven Pass, a path lined with old mining claims and long-abandoned cabins. By nightfall, the wind picked up, thick flakes erasing the trail behind him. At 1937, his first transmission came through, faint under static. Visibility 0. I'm taking shelter. Found an old cabin. No listing on the map. Coordinates pending. Dispatch tried to request his position, but the signal fractured into noise. The last thing they heard was his breathing and a single word. Lights. Then, silence. The storm lasted 3 days. Rescue operations couldn't begin until winds dropped below 40 knots. When they finally reached his snowmobile, it sat buried to the handlebars, engine frozen, fuel line cracked. No footprints, no drag marks, only a faint indentation leading toward the trees. Later, when Lucas was found wandering miles from the site, medics rushed him inside. He had frostbite on both hands and mild hypothermia, but what unsettled everyone wasn't his condition. It was the notebook clutched against his chest. Inside were pages filled edge to edge with vertical lines, hundreds of them, drawn in groups of 5. Each page marked an hour according to his watch. Next to the first set of tallies, a note read, "Sheltered inside, windows nailed, 1 candle lit, something outside, counting?" He could barely speak for the first 12 hours. When he did, the story came out in fragments. The official interview transcript runs 72 pages. What follows is the condensed record, reconstructed from his statements, radio data, and field notes recovered from the site. He said the cabin appeared through the snowfall like a shadow that refused to fade. A squat structure of blackened pine, half sunk into the slope, its roof bent under the weight of snow, no number plate, no ranger insignia. He forced the door open, rusted hinges screaming, and stepped inside. The air was dry, warmer than it should have been. Someone had left a candle burning on a table, its wax melted into a small crater. Dust hung in the light like smoke. On the walls, lines, hundreds of carved lines, neat and deliberate. Each wall carried a different count, 30 on one, 42 on another, a full 100 above the hearth. The marks weren't random. They followed the grain of the wood, etched deep as if by the same hand over years. He found a bunk with a blanket stiff from cold and a wooden chest containing an old journal bound in leather. The first page was dated December 3rd, 1952. The handwriting belonged to someone named R. Halpern, listed as Seasonal Ranger, Winter Station 5. But Station 5 had never existed on any roster. The entries began routine. Temperature logs, snowfall levels, then shifted. Heard knocking last night. Thought it was wind at first. Came again, closer. 3 knocks. Then silence. Every hour, same pattern. Can't locate source. Found more tallies today. Didn't make them. Lucas said he stopped reading after that. Outside, the storm intensified, pounding the roof with ice pellets. He sealed the shutters, stacked wood by the door, and checked his watch. 21 quarter hours. Then, the first knock came. 3 dull thuds, evenly spaced. He froze, listening. Nothing followed. He marked the time in his notebook, 3 vertical lines, and tried to ignore it. An hour later, it came again, louder against the rear wall. He circled the cabin with his flashlight. No footprints, no tracks, no trees close enough to scrape the boards. Midnight. 3 more knocks, this time beneath the floor. He lifted a plank near the hearth, only packed soil and frost below. The knocks ceased as soon as he looked. He kept counting the hours, recording every sound, every shift of wind. By the 4th sequence, fatigue blurred his notes. He wrote that he could hear movement inside the walls, slow dragging sounds, like nails drawn along wood. He pressed his ear to the paneling and felt faint vibration, as though someone on the other side was listening back. At 03 Sanu, his candle guttered out. Darkness swallowed the room. He tried the radio. No signal. The static seemed to pulse in rhythm with the knocks. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. He found the journal where he'd left it and turned to the final entry. The handwriting was frantic, gouging through the page. They want the count to reach the end. Every mark is an hour. When the wall's full, they open the door. He looked up. The last blank section of wall, beside the window, held only a few open inches. The knocking stopped. Then, from outside, a new sound, soft scraping, traveling around the cabin in a slow circle. He described it as someone tracing the walls with their fingers. He waited, breath held, until the noise reached the window. Through the frost-blurred glass he saw movement, a shadow crossing from left to right, then a face. Not distinct, only pale against the black. He stepped back. The door shook under impact, once, twice, then silence again. When he turned, the journal lay open to a page that hadn't existed before. Fresh ink glistened across it, the handwriting identical to his own. Hour 27, still counting. He felt for his pencil. It was already in his hand. His next memory was of carving fresh tallies into the wall, though he didn't remember starting. Each stroke felt necessary, like finishing someone else's work. The final sequence came just before dawn. The storm outside had quieted. For the first time, there was no wind, no sound at all. He stood by the door, listening. Then came the knocks, right beside his ear, from inside the wall. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. Then continuous pounding that filled the room like heartbeat. The boards bowed inward. Snow sifted down from the rafters. He grabbed his pack and slammed the latch open. The door burst outward, wind tearing through, snow spinning in sheets. He ran, stumbling downhill, until the forest swallowed the cabin from view. Even as he fled, the sound followed, the same rhythm echoing from within the trees, muffled, measured, unhurried. He said the forest itself seemed to knock back at him. When rescue teams later traced his steps, they expected to find a ruin or a snow cave. Instead, they reached an open clearing. No structure stood there, only charred earth beneath a thin layer of snow, as if a building had burned long ago. The soil was sterile, fused into glass in places. Geologists estimated the burn could have occurred decades earlier. Yet, in the center of the clearing, partially buried, they recovered the melted remnants of a brass lock plate stamped U.S. Park Service, serial number missing. Inside Lucas's notebook, investigators noticed something he hadn't written. Faint indentations visible only under angled light. Another hand had pressed from beneath the page. The marks formed a question. Whose hour is next? 3 months later, in May, a lightning strike set off a small wildfire near that same ridge. When firefighters contained it, they reported finding the blackened outline of a foundation, 4 walls 12 feet by 12, exactly matching an old ranger cabin blueprint decommissioned in 1953. Records listed it as Station 5, assigned to R. Halpern. The personnel file for Halpern had been destroyed in a flood years before. When Lucas recovered, he requested transfer to a flatland post. He never returned to the mountains. Before leaving, he handed his supervisor the notebook and asked for it to be locked away. His final words during debrief: "It's still counting. You can hear it if you stand still long enough." The following winter, technicians at the base reported rhythmic tapping coming through the heating vents during night shifts. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. Maintenance crews found no mechanical cause. Today, the coordinates where Station 5 once stood are listed as restricted terrain, unstable soil. But if you hike far enough north, past the last marked post, there's a place where the trees thin and the ground feels hollow beneath your boots. Some say, on quiet nights you can hear gentle knocking beneath your feet, steady, patient, like someone waiting for an answer. And if you listen too long, you might start counting along. It started with a sound no one could explain, faint, steady, and almost too regular to be noise. A call repeating through an empty channel, buried under static. The rangers who first heard it described it as a voice pressed through water, a tone that almost formed words before falling apart again. Dispatch logged it as interference, but interference doesn't ask for help. The first recording came in just past midnight on a Tuesday. The communications center was half-staffed, a skeleton crew running overnight watch. They said the voice was weak, but clear enough to catch fragments. Unit 7, copy, requesting assistance. Then silence. When they pulled the signal trace, the coordinates pointed somewhere inside the National Forest's restricted zone, a part of the park that had been sealed off since 1979, after a wildfire gutted an old ranger station and cut the power grid for 20 miles. The next night, the same frequency lit up again. Same distress code. But when the technicians checked the location, the coordinates had changed. This time, several miles north, deeper into an area with no roads, no towers, no active patrols. They logged it as a glitch, archived it, and reset the equipment. The call returned 37 minutes later. That was the moment dispatch realized they weren't tracing a signal. They were chasing something that moved. In the weeks that followed, more reports came in, isolated, short-lived bursts across the Ranger radio net. Each carried the same distress header, the same clipped tone. A voice fading in and out, always identifying itself as Unit 7. But there hadn't been a Unit 7 on record for over 60 years. The designation belonged to a ranger post decommissioned in 1962, the same one lost in the wildfire. The logs from that era still existed, brittle pages held in a binder at headquarters. They showed that the station, built in the early 50s, was meant as a relay hub for forest monitoring and emergency signals. A small, single-floor structure with a generator shed and 2 bunk rooms. According to official records, it burned to the foundation in under an hour. 3 rangers were on duty that night. None were recovered. But the radio system that carried their calls, the old analog frequency used by their equipment, had long since been retired. It shouldn't have been capable of transmitting anything. The team on duty during the first incident described a pattern. The signal would begin faint, rise for precisely 21 seconds, then cut out. The next time, it would return stronger. Always the same code, the same phrasing, the same unit name, and always from a coordinate that didn't exist on current topographic maps. When the park's communications supervisor finally escalated the issue, he sent the data logs to Federal Emergency Comms. The technicians there returned a simple note. No signal source found, possible reflection or looped carrier. But no one could explain how a reflection could move through closed terrain, changing latitude and longitude with each repetition. That's when they called in the search team. It was early autumn, the kind of cold that settles without warning. Ranger logs showed that 6 members volunteered for the assignment, outfitted with standard tracking gear, signal monitors, and satellite uplinks. Their objective: locate the origin of the broadcast, document any environmental anomalies, and return before nightfall. The team lead, Ranger Owens, reported stable readings for the first 3 miles. Then, as they crossed into the restricted boundary line, equipment began to fail in sequence. First the GPS units, then the signal relays. Each device began looping the same coordinates over and over as if they were walking in circles. The compass needles twitched erratically, unable to settle. At 15:43 hours, Owens recorded in his field journal that he could hear the signal faintly over his personal radio, the same voice, only clearer, repeating the words, "Unit 7, come in." He asked his team if anyone was transmitting. No one was. They shut their radios off entirely. The voice continued. As daylight started to thin, one of the members, Ranger Vega, reported seeing a flicker through the trees, like lamplight, moving in the pattern of someone walking with a flashlight. The group advanced cautiously, marking their path with orange tape. Owens logged that the light led them downslope into a narrow ravine, where the forest floor was damp and strangely warm, as though heat was rising from beneath the soil. That's when they saw it. At the base of the ravine, in a small clearing, stood a structure that hadn't been there on any map since 1962. A ranger station, painted forest green, with a metal roof that caught the fading sun. Its windows glowed faintly from inside. There was no sound, no smoke, no sign of life. But the front door stood open, and from within came the soft hum of a generator. Owens's final log for that evening reads, "Building appears intact. Will investigate interior." What happened after that remains uncertain. The search team's body cams captured 31 minutes of footage before cutting to static. The recordings show them entering the structure, flashlights passing over framed maps, a corkboard covered in yellowed notices, and a desk where a radio still sat humming. On the table beside it, a coffee cup, half full, steam rising faintly in the cold air. The next morning, when the secondary team arrived to retrieve them, the clearing was empty. No building, no sign of disturbance. The ground was undisturbed, covered in frost. Every trace of the structure and the 6 rangers was gone. But the radio call continued. Over the following weeks, dispatch kept receiving the same message. Unit 7, requesting assistance. Each time it came from a new coordinate. Each time it pointed deeper, into the forest. Some say the transmission isn't a call for help. It's a recording, one caught in a loop, repeating across decades, seeking a signal that no longer exists. Others believe it's something else entirely, not a recording, but a response. Were they answering a distress call that night, or were they replaying one from the dead?